This session is a bit of an updated take on a familiar topic, right? So there'll be partly reminders in here, but I'm also going to put in some new concepts to help you commit to doing the work that will help you get more opportunities into your pipeline. So for those of you who've been going through your members area, a couple of things that we're going to talk about today are included in stuff that you've seen online. For those of you who haven't been so diligent in going through your members area, well, then a lot of this stuff will be new to you, but we'll try and put a new spin on it as well for those of you who have reviewed the content online. So as I often talk about, there are three sort of core principles of prospecting that I recommend being focused on with your lead generation efforts. It's consistent, persistent, and proactive. And I think when you do this, you've got more control over who you work with. You're not forced to work with undesirable clients who make your life more difficult and take time away from your good clients, because if you're consistent, persistent, and proactive, you know that the more you prospect, the more confidence you can have that your system of lead generation is going to continue to generate this steady flow of opportunity. And that means you can confidently basically let go of clients that you've outgrown and start to replace them with the ones that are more of a pleasure to work with. And when we talk about consistent, basically what we mean is that prospecting should be a non-negotiable activity that occurs every day. And I've said this before in these calls, but I think the best way to make sure that it happens every day is to schedule it. And I'm going to talk more in the moment about how you can actually do the prospecting that you've scheduled. Because I think sometimes people are scheduling stuff and the feedback I get is, yeah, but then I don't do it. So we'll talk about ways to actually commit to the prospecting that you've scheduled. And I think one point to remember here is that being busy serving existing clients is not a reason to stop prospecting, okay? Just because that is all it's going to do is create future gaps in your revenue pipeline. So we've got to be consistent even when it feels like we've got a lot on, so we're continuing to put new opportunities into our pipeline. The next principle, persistent, just means that we don't just try and contact someone once. We don't just send one email and then say we've done our job here. We've got to effectively prospect people in a proactive way. And we've got to be persistent about it. So there's this expression which is the fortune is in the follow-up. And a lot of people say that follow-up is a bit of a dirty word, like you don't want to call up people and say, hello, I'm just following up. But in terms of the process, that is how you're going to get more opportunities moving forward, by continuing to follow up with people and to progress them through your pipeline. And I think the takeaway for me is that too many agents give up too easily. And when I was leading teams, I used to see that people had prospected someone once or twice and then they hadn't done anything more, and they're just treating the opportunity like it's dead. So what I want to do in this session is give you the tools required to not be one of those agents, to be someone who is a process to continue to engage with people until you get them into a conversation that is going to take them to the next step. And the final one is proactive. And I know a lot of people feel like, well, I don't need to prospect because I'm very happy with my inbound lead flow. I've got referrals, I've got my network, I post on social media, stuff is coming to me. And look, I agree that social media content or referrals or having a big network is a very leveraged way to create lead generation. And it's probably easier than outbound prospecting, but you don't have any control over who sees a post when you post on LinkedIn. You don't have any control over the quality or the number of leads that do come to you when you're relying on referrals, when you're relying on your network. You can influence it, like you can create better content, you can remind people to send you leads. But I think the best way to be guaranteed of reaching high value prospects is by taking proactive steps to connect with them, the ones that you particularly want to do business with. So consistent, persistent, and proactive are the three headings. And what I want to do now is go beyond a little bit of that theory and just give you some practical ways that you can adhere to some of these core principles of prospecting. So let's talk about, first of all, any questions about consistent, persistent, or proactive. You can type into the chat or put a Q in the chat and I'll invite you to unmute your line. No? Okay. If you do have a question, just type into the chat. I'll keep an eye on it as we're moving through this session. Let's get into consistent. Okay. So consistent, as I said, it's about scheduling it, making it a priority, and hopefully we're doing it daily, right? So it becomes a habit. I've got a question for you. If you can type into the chat, how many hours do you spend on prospecting activity every single week? And if it's not the same number every week, just give me an average or what would be typical. Thanks, Joseph. 2 hours? I don't know, says Chris. 5, says Steve. How many hours are we spending a week on prospecting? 5 to 10, says Greg. 10 hours from the crew on the Sunshine Coast with Knight Frank. Okay. So those same people who have contributed, how many hours should you spend a week? So you've told me how much you are, or if you don't know, how many hours a week do you think you should be spending on prospecting? Chris says 10, so 2 hours a day. Greg says 10, which is the upper end of his range. Steve says 10. Tara says, I've been doing 1 hour a week, but want to do 3 hours per week. Okay, so look, the amount of time that you spend on prospecting really depends on what your goals are. Okay. So once you get clear on what your goals are, you'll find the answer on how much time you need to be spending on prospecting, the aggregate time per week. Now, you might be able to reach your income goals without prospecting or by prospecting less than others. But if you really want to grow your income, and if you also have a goal to only work with the best clients in the market, then you may have to commit to doing the work that's required to make that happen. And there's a good chance that some prospecting activity is the first step to making that happen, to reaching your income goals and to working with better clients. Now, one of the, I guess, complaints that people have is that, or the excuses, is that I'm already busy. I don't have time for prospecting. So I want to just give you a few tools, a few ideas of how you can find some more time in your weekly schedule. And this little part here is a whole module in itself. So I'll get into this another time. But first of all, you've got to confirm your priorities, right? What is actually important to you? Is it growing your income? Is it taking it easy? What's important in terms of your personal health, in terms of your relationships, in terms of your financial results, business, personal, financial health? What is important to you? And then we want to determine the value of your time. Okay. And the way you determine the value of your time is something called the rule of 2,000 hours. It's pretty simple. What did you make last year? Divide that by 2,000. That gives you a rough idea of what your effective hourly rate is. So if last year you made $200,000 divided by 2,000 is $100 an hour. So that is the value of your time. The next step would be to become really present on the way that you are spending your time. So to actually audit your time, which is literally writing down everything that you're doing and seeing where is all this time that you say you're too busy to prospect, where is actually the time going? And where are you spending time on things that perhaps are, one, not consistent with you achieving your priorities, and two, don't represent the value of your time. So if you're spending your time doing $20, $30 an hour tasks, then maybe that's a reason why you don't have enough time to prospect. If you spend an hour on the weekend washing your car when you could pay someone $50 to do it, maybe that's a good trade because you could then reinvest that time into prospecting, just for example. So while I know some of you don't have the opportunity to hire a virtual assistant or to delegate to somebody under you, there are still ways that you can create more time for yourself if you believe that the value of your time is at a certain level and that reinvesting that into prospecting will increase, will one, get you the return on that rate, and to actually help you increase the value of your time as well. Once you've gone through and taken a look at how it is that you're spending your time, and I've given you one idea like the car wash, but we want to identify opportunities to eliminate, so to stop doing stuff, to automate, to see are there ways that we're doing things that actually, I could be using ChatGPT or some software or a CRM system or something to do more efficiently, more easily, more effectively. Is there the opportunity to outsource some things like the washing of the car, like the laundry at home or something like that? And then with the time that we get back by stopping doing things, by automating some things or by outsourcing some things, we want to then reallocate the time that we've gained for what moves us closer towards our goals. Not only our prospecting goals, but also the other goals in relation to our relationships, our health, personal aspirations, and so forth. So that's a little snippet of ways that you can create more time. I'm going to do a session on that for you guys later on that, because it's a whole thing. But what I've found is that once we get very present to the way that we're spending our time, we often realize that we're spending more time than we realize on certain things, which are doing nothing to move us closer towards our goals. The other thing I want to say in relation to consistency and scheduling activity is just making sure that we're using some sort of CRM to ensure that we are ready to go when it's time to prospect, and that your prospecting time is not spent doing research. So we want to remove friction from the process and say that, right, if we're going to prospect between 11 and 12 on a Wednesday, then that is when I am dialing. I'm ready to go with phone numbers, with things to talk to people about. I've put my phone on mute. I've shut down my email. Everything is just focused in this hour to speaking with as many people as possible, right? And the other thing a CRM does is it allows you to get ready to prospect, but also it gives you something to show from your prospecting activity. It's a record of what you've done, and that gives you also a standard to maintain. Your CRM system should show you how many connects that you've made, or how many prospects that you've connected with, or how many opportunities that you've generated. We want to then track that over time and to see if we're keeping up a standard, if we're improving. And that is a way to see if we are being consistent. And the standard is the next point I wanted to get into, which is what is the standard which we want to see become, whether it's our daily routine or our weekly minimum, right? So we want to have a daily routine so that when you have more listings, you still have time to prospect. I've got a question for you guys, because I've got an idea of this, but I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think a standard day for a commercial real estate agent should include? What are the 3 or 4 activities that every agent should be doing every single day, do you think? No right or wrong answers. Let's brainstorm a few, and then we'll see if we can put them into 3 buckets that I recommend agents to focus on when sort of planning out their perfect day. Daily admin. Thanks, Isaac. What else we got? What should agents be doing every day? Returning to inquiries. Thank you, Joseph. Come on, guys. Here we go. Chris says, plan, chat with colleagues, research market, canvas, callbacks, think. Okay, plenty there. Tara says, staff meetings, emails, buyer, tenant inquiry and callbacks, inspections, owner updates, research, admin, IM, submissions. Okay, great. There is a lot of things, and probably the buckets that I've created, and just give everyone maybe one more second to contribute to this, because I know that you guys will have a lot of ideas. Ben says prospect, deal follow-up, new business, admin. Deal follow-up, new business, admin. Yeah, okay. Here's the way that I would recommend thinking about it. And I've been working with one of my private clients on this to create sort of like the perfect day for some of his agents. And I'll put it into 3 buckets. And admin, I guess, is the one that I'm seeing come up that doesn't really fall into any of these buckets, but admin, I guess, is related to all 3. I'd want to spend some time each day on business development, right? So that includes prospecting, but also it can include building your personal brand. So it can be direct outreach, or it can be creating some sort of content or email blast or something that's going to contribute to bringing more leads into the pipeline. So we want to spend some time on business development. We want to spend some time on working our listings. So working the listings, like working on marketing collaterals, canvassing, inspections, negotiations, callbacks, stuff like that. And I think also we want to spend time on managing the vendors. So reporting on what's happening, what's next. So the 3 buckets were growing the business development, prospecting, building your personal brand, I guess, responding to submissions, pitching, and so forth. We want to then work the listings that we've got, get those deals continuing to progress. And also we want to manage our vendors in a proactive way. So if they're calling us with questions about what it is that is going on the deal, then we're not being proactive enough with keeping them updated. So that's just one way to think about it. And the point is that we're always setting some time each day for business development. We're setting a standard or a minimum requirement for yourself that your day is not done until your prospecting activity is complete. And there's a guy named Michael Bull who owns like a pretty big real estate practice in the United States, who I've had some dealings with. And he told me a good story, which was one day he had a really great day where he'd he'd literally made hundreds of thousands of dollars of commission that day. And his assistants knew that he'd had quite a big day. And he came back to the office at about 4:45 and he started to pick up the phone and started to do his prospecting. And his assistant said to him, "What are you doing? Like you've done enough today." And he's like, "No, no, no, it's my day's not done until I've finished my dials." And that is the definition of done for him when he has finished his prospecting. So I think when you set that as your minimum standard, as a standard for a day to be done when you've done your calls, then prospecting is it's then a habit which is set and it's not going to fall by the wayside even when you are busy. All right, so set a standard, create some sort of flow of your day that allows you to have time to prospect. And the last concept I want to explore here is this idea of a virtuous cycle of prospecting. So when you exercise, it improves your fitness level. It makes it easier to do. It's more rewarding. I think it's the same with prospecting, right? That enhances your sales skills. It leads to better results and increased motivation. So a virtuous cycle is like a sequence of events that reinforce themselves through a feedback loop. In prospecting, it means that your consistent effort leads to better skills, which in turn leads to better results, which further encourages you to commit or recommit to prospecting. Now, I'm fully aware that when you start prospecting, it can feel daunting and you often get mixed results. But like with any skill, it gets better with practice. And the key is persistence, which is this second principle of prospecting I'm going to go over in a moment, and also a willingness to learn from each interaction. And as you refine your approach and you become more comfortable with prospecting, you'll see the improved results, right? And that success will boost your confidence and motivation. It makes prospecting a more integral and enjoyable part of every day at work, because I think when you get better at something, you start to enjoy it more. So just to show this visually, this is this virtuous cycle of prospecting. It starts with consistent action. So we start with being consistent. That's our first principle. It's about making it a daily habit, setting aside dedicated times and sticking to them. And once it is consistent, it turns that sporadic effort into a reliable routine. And then we start to see the skill enhancement, because every call, email, meeting helps you improve, right? And you want to make sure that we're looking for feedback. And a few ways that you can do that: ask your colleagues to listen in on your calls and to give you some feedback. Record yourself on a prospecting call and then listen back to it. And you want to get to the point where you can listen back to yourself on a prospecting call and not cringe. And once you can listen back to yourself and not cringe, then I think you're at a level where your skill has gotten to a point where you're comfortable with making those calls. There's always room for improvement, of course, but I don't know about you, but sometimes I listen back to, well, maybe you don't listen back to your calls. I listen back to mine sometimes and something, oh, geez, I didn't handle that very well. But that's where the learning is. So engage in ongoing training, utilize resources to sharpen your skills. And I think once you do that, then you start to see the increased results from your improved skills and your consistent effort. You get more positive outcomes. And we want to track these, right? Using the CRMs. And that will also show you what works best in terms of messaging, in terms of the types of prospects that maybe you have more progress with, and even the time of the day, right? It could be that you're a morning person or you're an afternoon person. It could be the people that you're dealing with are more likely to answer the phone in the morning. If you're prospecting cafes, you would probably call them in the afternoon, not in the morning, because they're busy in the morning making coffees and then getting lunch prep done. And then reinforcement, right? So this is where the cycle reinforces itself. Your growing confidence makes prospecting, I think, less intimidating and more rewarding, and that encourages you to keep pushing forward with consistent action. And so the virtuous cycle of prospecting, it just keeps feeding into itself, and it creates a self-sustaining loop of prospecting and results. So it starts with committing to committed, consistent prospecting, and that helps you increase your client base, but also sets you up to be a leader in your market. So with that in mind, in the chat, what are some of the prospecting challenges that you face with committing to prospecting consistently? Where does the challenge exist for you? Where are the challenges for prospecting for you? Joe says, other urgent matters getting in the way. Yeah. Tara says, mine is finding time and then actually committing myself. Yeah, so it's around deciding that it actually is a priority and then sticking to that. Any others? Procrastination. Yeah. Yeah, that is one like, and I think that's one way to deal with procrastination, Chris, is to just make sure that we're ready to go to remove that friction. So when it's time to start prospecting, the numbers are there, the research is done. There's nothing else that can just shut down your computer if you need to. Put yourself in a room with nothing but your phone and your list. There's a few ways maybe to deal with procrastination. All right, I want to crack on because I want to talk about these two other areas, which is persistence and then proactive. So we just covered consistent. So persistence all about the number of touch points I think that you need to successfully connect with and engage with a cold prospect. And that's why we need to be persistent. And the number of touch points really varies quite a lot depending on a range of factors. But most studies cite that it typically takes between 7 and 13 touch points to effectively reach a cold prospect, right? So that means if you just try and call someone once, or if you email them once, then you're not doing what's required to actually get in touch with them. And this range is, I think, reflective of the necessity to build awareness, the importance of creating a foundation for trust to be established, not to build trust, but just to create the conditions for that trust can be built. And then I think you also need to obtain some level of recognition with the prospect in a landscape where decision makers are inundated with information and solicitations all day, every day, right? And that's only increased due to the use of automation in outbound campaigns. So we've got to push through that with personalization and persistence in order to break through. And every touch point, I think, gives you the opportunity to perhaps present some type of value, to demonstrate your expertise, and to spark the establishment of a relationship, which could eventually lead to that prospect becoming a client, or at least get them to take the next step. And we'll talk about that next step in a moment. So we want to have touch points across a variety of different channels. So email, social media interactions, and social media interactions, just to expand your mind a little bit, can include things like, yes, a DM, but also you can record a voice note and put that into a DM. LinkedIn gives you that function. You can react to somebody's post. You can comment on their post. You can share something with them and send it to them as a DM. There's a lot of different ways to engage with people on social media, and they all count as one of those 7 to 13 touch points that you need to effectively reach somebody. Of course, there are phone calls, there's voicemail messages, there's in-person meetings, right? So to effectively communicate with prospects, we want to tailor the communication to their specific needs and what it is that the way they go about things, right? So persistence and relevance are key in navigating through these interactions to make each touch point count. So that's touch points. I wanted to just talk about actually being persistent as a way of being, because that shows your level of commitment. And it's a demonstration of how hard you're willing to work on their behalf. It proves to the prospect that you are who you are, right? Being persistent means that you don't take anything for granted, and it shows how hard you're willing to work on their behalf. And when it comes to taking things for granted, just a couple of ways that can manifest itself when we take things for granted, or we make assumptions that are unhelpful or perhaps untrue. So when we have complacency and we assume, okay, well, they'll call us back, we've tried. They might, but it might also be better for you to move the process along if it's important to you. Also, I think when we make assumptions about, this person, this company, this buyer is loyal to this, or they believe that, so therefore I won't contact them. Well, if you don't prospect them, then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So we've got to always test our assumptions and have a go. So I think the question is, if you're committed to being persistent in getting your clients the best results, if you are committed to doing that, then why not prove that in the way that you're pursuing their business? The other thing I wanted to share with you is just about cadences. And for those of you who were with us in May, we talked a bit about this in our May session. For those of you who didn't attend or have joined the program since then, you can go back in your members area and watch back a full session on cadences. But just to give you a definition and a quick refresh, a cadence is just like a rhythm or a tempo. So I think the best way to describe it in practical terms is, whenever I go and inspect a house on the weekend, just having a sticky beak around my neighborhood on a Saturday, I know that the agent is always going to call me back on a Wednesday to get my feedback and to qualify me, because that's their cadence, right? And I think in commercial real estate, we don't have as many systems and processes to follow up and to systemize the sales process. So what a cadence does is it operationalizes the way we deal with prospects in various situations. So it's a series of touch points for a particular situation that can be used for inbound and outbound. So for example, the way that you would follow up and contact a cold prospect would be different to the way that you would follow up and contact a referred opportunity, which would be different to the way that you would follow up and contact a not now prospect that you'd previously prospected who told you they weren't ready, and then you come back to them 3 months later, right? There's a different way to approach these people. So we've got to have a different set of cadences in the way that we approach them. So that session we did in May goes through this in a lot of detail. We've already established that you need more than one touch point. You need 7 to 13. And a cadence just creates a system of how to go about it, right? You can get help from ChatGPT to create cadences for different scenarios. And again, in that training, we talk about the way that you can use ChatGPT to help with that. You can see that in this example, a couple of times you're doing 2 things, and that counts as 2 touch points. So when you contact people on 2 different channels on the same day or at the same time, you actually speed up that process of the 7 to 13 touch points that you need to get in touch with someone. So don't be afraid after you've called someone to also send them an email. And you can actually make that as part of it. Hey, Chris, it's Darren Krakowiak speaking. I'll send you a quick email regarding what I was calling about and look forward to talking to you. Please give me a call between 3 and 5 today if you're available. Otherwise, I will be calling you again on Thursday. Thanks. And then you could send them an email with a little bit more information just to close that loop and to make sure they've got more likelihood of seeing that you've been trying to get in contact with them. Just on that, what do people do when they get a voicemail? Do you leave a message or not? So yes for leave a message, no for do not leave a message on voicemail. Do you leave a voicemail message? Yes, says Isaac. Sometimes, says Tara. Voicemail and follow-up text. Best practice there. Thank you, Joseph. Depends if I know them, yes. If it's a new contact, no. Okay. Yes, always. Voicemail and text, says Steve. So I think a voicemail is a good idea. It only takes a moment to leave, and it's just another touch point, right? A missed call is one touch point, then the voicemail message is potentially another touch point. So I would be inclined to leave it at all times. But I think there's a way that you can do it that puts you in a higher value position, right? So rather than saying, oh, can you please call me back regarding this? You could say, I'll be available between 4 and 5 today to take your call. That just changes it a little bit, right? It's not, please call me back whenever. It's, hey, I'm a busy person and I've got some time between 4 and 5 today where I'll be able to speak to you if you're available to call me back then. The little things that you can do to just change the dynamics of a voicemail message. A couple of you said text. So text is another one that I think is good to use. And I wanted to give you a couple of re-engagement text messages for buyers or for tenants. One of them is, if you've had buyers that have come in on previous campaigns, is just to send out a text or you could put this in an email as well, is just, are you still looking to buy a commercial property in 2024? And what we're doing there is we're just looking to start conversations with people, right? This is all just different ways of lead generation. And depending on the level of engagement that you had with them, you could go with something more personalized, which was, hey, Greg, I was just thinking about our last conversation. Are you still looking to buy a commercial property in 2024? Or if you didn't speak to them, you could try something more specific, like, hey, Stephen, it's Darren from ABC Commercial. You previously inquired about 123 Main Street. It recently settled for X million. Are you still looking to buy in 2024? And again, people who have been inquiring about selling, are you still looking to sell? What more do you need? We're asking open-ended questions to try and open up more conversations, because the conversations is where the conversions ultimately happen. All right, so that's a prospecting cadence. Any questions on that? So we've done consistent, we've done persistent, last is proactive. Not as much to say on this one. So what we're talking about here is outbound prospecting. That's the discussion today, not inbound inquiry. Okay, so these are prospects that we're specifically targeting. So it's proactive by nature. And I think if we can be specific, that's a good thing. Specific about who it is that we want to work with, specific about how we can help, and specific about what it is that we do. So I think it helps to have more specialization in what it is that you're going after, whether it's specialized overall in the marketplace or just more targeted with the way that we're segmenting the market and prospecting at a certain time. So doing things like defining your ideal customer profile, creating an avatar around it. So again, we've talked about this before, getting an idea of my typical perfect future customer is a 45 to 50-year-old guy. He likes the NRL. He owns 2 properties. He's got an accountant for his financial planning. He's married. He might be divorced. He's probably got teenage kids, whatever, right? So what is all the things that we know about this person so that when we create content, when we send them emails, we can develop messaging which is specifically designed to more appeal to them. And that messaging then attracts more people like that. And I think the more detailed the definition, the more relevant your approach is going to be, and the more it's likely to resonate with your ideal future client. Isaac says, do you have a proven system cadence that we can copy? The answer short is no, Isaac, because it really depends on the market that you're in. But what we've got is a few different frameworks, and that training that we did in May takes you through a few examples. And I think generally they work better over a shorter time frame. And the point is that we're not trying to get someone to buy something. All we're looking for them to do over that cadence, it might be 21 days, might be 14 touch points over that 21 days. If we're just trying to get them to either pick up the phone when we call them, or to respond to an email, or to call us back, to get us into a conversation and to then book an appointment for the next step. That's what the whole point of the cadence is, to get them to take the next step. All right, so be specific is the first part of being proactive. The next part is help the prospect progress. So once your specific approach has got their attention, once you've got them on the line, once you've got them in a conversation, it's then time to give them your attention. So once you've got their attention, give them your attention. So ask open-ended questions, listen more than you talk. And remember, the point of prospecting is not to get all the information. It's not to deliver your entire pitch or get a deal done. It's to simply confirm that the prospect is qualified to move through to the next step of the process. And based on what you learn from listening to them, we want to focus on the next step you want them to commit to, and which makes sense for them, and then move them towards it. And the reason why we want to be always just focused on what the next step is that we want them to take is that we're in control of where this is going. But also, if it's just one next step, this reduces the pressure on you to move heaven and earth. We're just trying to get them to schedule a 30-minute meeting with us. We're just trying to get them to schedule an appraisal, for example, or whatever the next step is for you that comes from prospecting. And by having a next step ready for them, we make it easy for them to commit to it. This is what the next step is. Would you like to do that? Ask for their agreement. Invite them to take that next step. At this stage of the process, this is typically what we do next, right? Not a huge impasse, just a micro commitment to move things along. And the last thing I want to say about being proactive is, if we're going to be proactive about who it is that we contact, then we want to make sure that they're ideal prospects and that they're high value relationships. That was the name of a training that we did in November last year. So you can again find that in your members area. One of the things that we did was talk about creating your Dream 100. And that's just creating a list of the 100 relationships that would have a material impact on your business if you're able to develop them further. And then a plan to advancing those relationships. It could be about clients, with identifying warm referrals, using LinkedIn to find a way to get in contact with them. You might have a social selling approach on LinkedIn, like commenting on their posts, sending them personalized connection requests, sharing relevant content to build visibility and credibility with people within your Dream 100. So it's a specific outbound strategy, and it probably takes a little bit longer than like your typical prospecting because it's high value. Yeah, so what else do I want to say here? Oh yeah, previous ones. Your previous clients are the most qualified prospects that you have because they've already been qualified because you've done business with them. So make sure you're reaching out to your past clients before they have a need. Don't just assume that they'll come back to you because you've done business with them before. And I think we should assume that they're being prospected by your competitors. So you may as well do the same. But the point about prospecting your previous clients is, one, you know who they are, you know if they're qualified, you know if you want to continue working with them. but also you've got the advantage because it's 10 times easier for you to win work from an existing client than it is to win work from a prospect you've never worked with before. So that means, one, you've got the advantage when it comes to chasing those opportunities against anyone else who's trying to win work from your existing clients, but also it's a much better investment of your time because it's far more easy for you to convert those opportunities. Okay, so I think that's everything I wanted to cover today. So I'm going to now, you can unmute your line at any time if you've got a question or if you've got a comment. I want to ask in the chat, what was the one thing that you took away from this session that was helpful? What was the one idea that perhaps is going to be meaningful for you to be able to take some action and to improve your prospecting skills and commitment? 2,000 hours for Chris. Yeah, understanding the value of your time. Listen more than you talk and focus on the next step. Listen more than you talk is a good one. Just remember, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that proportion. Perfect day layout, says Joe. Yeah, awesome. What was it again? It's prospecting. It's business development activity. That can be prospecting, that can be pitching, that can be preparing, doing appraisals. The next thing is we've got to work our listings. And then finally, we've got to manage our vendors. That was the framework of a perfect day for an agent that I've worked on creating with another client. Schedule a perfect day consistently. Yeah. And remember, when people ask you to do things at times which isn't consistent with what your perfect day looks like, you do have the option of negotiating another time with them, right? Now, if they insist on doing an appraisal in the afternoon when you should be dealing with your existing listings, well, I guess you accept that. But then once you know what your perfect day looks like, then you know what you're sacrificing by scheduling something else in place of what you should have been doing. And then you can take steps to say, okay, well, I've lost an hour today working my listings. I need to make sure I recover that time in the morning or tomorrow, right? So every day we make sure that the things that we want to make sure that every day we're getting done the minimum things that are going to continue to see our business grow and see us improve. Steve says, structuring my prospecting week with researching new client days and then call days. One of the things about researching new clients is that you can do it at any time. It's not a 9 to 5 activity. You can't prospect someone at 9 p.m., but you can certainly, if you want to, if you've got kids and you put the kids to bed, you want to spend half an hour just sort of planning the next day, thinking about who you're going to be calling the next day, what it is that you want to talk to them about, what it is that you need to get done. That can be a really productive way to make sure that then when you get to your desk and when it's time to get to work, that you're ready to go just by doing that little bit of planning.